Back here on Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. Big 12 today on Big 12 Radio. Powered by Modelo. Modelo fan rule number 31. There is no off season. There is
no off and off season. There's only research.
Research. That's what we do. All right, TCU is the team we're highlighting today.
Let's hop aboard the Caravan and make a quick pit stop in Fort Worth before we get on our way back elsewhere across the country. Thank you.
That is so loud. I love it.
Because
all right.
The off season, there is no such thing as off season. There's only research.
And we research these teams.
Because we are Modelo full-time fans. Cheers to you, Modelo full-time fans, bringing us the spring caravan.
All right, so TCU back-to-back 9-win seasons. That's the foundation. They actually finished ranked in the final AP poll. They were number 25. They went 5-4 in the Big 12, back-to-back 9-win seasons. The first time TCU has done that in over a decade.
It's interesting, too, because I was almost a bit surprised that they were fourth in the league. Like, I saw the standings, I went through the season, and it's bizarre because it feels like, oh, they were fourth? They won 9 games? And look, they were a preseason darling. And I think there were a few opportunities they had to be in the conversation for the Big 12 championship, and that's maybe why they were kind of disappointing despite winning 9 games.
Well, remember they got boat raced by BYU. And then the next week they went on the road and beat Houston and then beat USC in the bowl game to get to those 9 wins. So the big loss is Josh Hoover, the quarterback, transferring to Indiana. They lose a lot of guys on their defense to the NFL. Caleb Elam's Orr graduated.
Nnamdi Obiezer, who we just saw at the draft combine as well.
Bud Clark is gone. Ken Seals, who was the quarterback for the bowl game, he's graduated. Joseph Manjack has graduated. Eric McAllister, who was first in the Big 12 in receiving yards a season ago. So they have holes to fill. A ton of movement in terms of the coaching staff, even though you'll hear from Sonny Dykes here in about 15 minutes and what he says about the new offensive coordinator. He claims it's not going to look that much different. But I think the headliner for me is, what does this offense look like with the new offensive coordinator, and how does Harvard transfer Jaden Craig fit this offense? This kid's massive, 6'3", 230 pounds, Harvard's all-time leading passer and touchdowns tosser. He was an FCS All-American, a really low career interception rate of less than 2%, but that's a big jump from FCS to Big 12 football.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of a brand-new team. You know, Gordon Samus steps in as the new offensive coordinator, and we'll hear from Sonny Dykes and ask Sonny about what he expects this offense to look like. But I'd imagine he likes the way to look in terms of, you know, having some of the same air raid principles that he's always had, mixing it in with, you know, a focus on running the football. Yeah, and then Jaden Craig. I mean, he's 6'3", 230 pounds. He's a grad transfer and set the Harvard program single-season record for completions at 208, touchdown passes at 25, and passing yards at 2,800. But I'll say, you know, the defenses that he saw in the Ivy League going to be a little bit different than the defense chasing him in the Big 12. But I love what they've added. I think they've done a really good job of the portal. They added a linebacker from Virginia Tech named Michael Short. Karan Hayward, a defensive end from Western Kentucky who had, was just really good at Western Kentucky. And then Landon Walker, a running back from the Colorado School of Mines. When you think about some of these smaller school kids, Sonny Dykes going to Harvard, Colorado School of Mines, and Western Kentucky to get 3 important players in the portal.
And Landon Walker is a big bruising back. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. He's from Fort Worth. He played high school ball there, ran for over 2,000 yards at the Division II level, averaged 6.5 yards per carry. I think at running back they have a really nice two-headed monster with him and Jeremy Payne. Jeremy Payne broke out the last 3 games. They won their last 3 games. Okay, so 9-4. They were 6-4, and to your point, I think kind of deemed a disappointment. And then they won at Houston. They beat Cincinnati and they beat USC. And Jeremy Payne is the one common denominator offensively. He went for 103 at Houston, a $174 and 2 touchdowns against Cincinnati, and then that incredible game-winning touchdown catch on a little screenplay against USC. He finished that game with over 120 yards of total offense, receiving and rushing. he could be one of the best running backs in the league, and they've added some weight on the offensive line with Noah McKinney, with Buchanan, the transfer from FIU, two just massive tackles.
Yeah, Buchanan allowed just 2 sacks the last 2 seasons and has been a critical pass protector. And then you also mentioned the transfer from Oklahoma State, Noah McKinney. So those are 2 guys that should start at tackle for TCU as they try to fill in their offensive line that's going to have some missing pieces to it from last year. And this is, again, an offense specifically with a ton of turnover. I mean, Jeremy Payne is the one guy, right? Other than that, though, offensive line has to replace a bunch of guys. You got to replace your top 2 receivers in McAllister and Manjack. You've got to replace your your quarterback. So, and then of course your offensive coordinator. So a lot will be new at TCU on the offensive side of the football. For me, I think there's a lot to like about this team and a lot to be optimistic about, but there's also a lot of question marks.
TCU coach Sonny Dykes here in about 10, but he was asked this week, he was on a TCU Frogs in a Pod podcast, and he was asked about the many different reasons that players transfer, and this was centered around his quarterback, Josh Hoover, who about this time last year had this big social media announcement that he's coming back to TCU and that Tennessee offered him a bunch of money, and he said no. Well, this year he's taken the bag as he heads to the defending national champions, Indiana. Here's what Sonny said about why players transfer.
I mean, it's hard not to get your feelings hurt.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is, I don't really get mad. My thing is always when something doesn't go well, the first thing I always try to do is look in the mirror and go, okay, why did we lose this game? What could I have done better? Mm-hmm. Or why did this young man decide to leave our program? What could I have done better? And so that part hurts you a little bit. It bothers you just because you feel like somehow, you didn't meet their expectations maybe. And so that part's hurts. But you got to kind of figure it out. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, look, these kids are just like all of us. As adults, we have jobs, and the way you have to look at this is these are these young people's jobs, and and there's a factor that goes into choosing, why we have the job we have now, and would we leave this job to go to a different job? And there's a lot of factors involved in that, quality of life and all the different things, people that you're working with, ability to be able to accomplish your long-term goals. But there's always a financial part of that as well. And now the financial part exists in college football. And so, sometimes guys leave solely for money. Sometimes guys leave for better opportunity. I think sometimes all of us as fans of college football, we all want it to be black and white.
Yeah.
We want to say it's all about the money.
Yep.
Well, it's just like with us and our friends. Sometimes it's all about the money with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
And some other guys could care less about the money. Mm. And these college athletes are no different. Some of them get homesick and want to go closer to home. Some of them aren't happy with their playing time. Some of them don't like the scheme or the new coaches or whatever, it's just not working or whatever the case may be. And then some of them it's for money. And so they're really not any different than us. I think everybody wants to say money is the only factor. Money is a factor. And to some people, money is the only factor. But if you put a room of 100 adults together, and some guys will leave, change their whole life,
drop everything.
Love that from TCU coach Sonny Dykes.
Yeah, it's great perspective there, and I mean, he added sometimes your friends are only in it for money, right, or the fame, and I'm sure he knows that, right? I mean, I'm sure he's had instances where people attach themselves to him and become friends, and they realize the only reason why that's the case is because he's Sonny Dykes, a football coach in the Big 12, and makes a bunch of money, right? I mean, I felt that from Sonny when he said that. I think he's 100% right, and obviously a perspective that's really important to share that some kids do want money. Some kids are all about the money. I just want to get the highest paid and maximize it. Some kids are about the money and the right fit. Some kids are just about the right fit and figuring out that if I can be successful here, I can go to the NFL and make tons of money. So I think everybody's different. Everybody's got different motivations, and I think he said it right there. But they did lose some guys to the portal, but they've also, they had 3 guys at the combine, right? 4 guys at the combine. Was McAllister at the combine too?
Yeah.
So Bud Clark, Obi Iser, and Caleb Elam-Zor. By the way, those 2 guys, Obi Iser and Elam-Zor, basically were the big storylines from the linebacker position.
Right, which also caught my attention. I mean, those were 2 of the biggest risers in terms of their stock at the combine at that position, which tells me that TCU has some holes to fill defensively. Love the human interest side of what Sonny Dykes said. These kids, there's a variety of reasons. Everybody's different. Love the note that he had about some kids are just homesick and want to get closer to home, which in this case works out very well for TCU because a lot of Dallas area kids want to come back and play closer to home, which is right there in their backyard. So they add Karan Hayward, their big edge rusher transfer from Western Kentucky. They add a linebacker from Virginia Tech who was a starter last year in the ACC, Michael Short. In the secondary, they'll ask Jacob Fields, the Louisiana Tech transfer, who is an all-league guy in the Conference USA. He's going to be their safety, trying to fill the void left behind from Bud Clark. Then they add a couple of corners in the portal, and then they have guys that were backups, and they're very much a developmental program in terms of they produce at the cornerback position, NFL talent, guys that stick around in the program, and it's next man up in terms of Lamarian James and Vernon Glover, who showed flashes last year as backups.
Yeah, and as much as they lose on the offensive side, I mean, you mentioned some of the guys they're losing in pass rush. Also, Cody Canada, MacGyver, Bud Clark, all gone. So they had a ton in terms of their safeties, their corners, their linebackers, their defensive tackles. So a lot was needed. I mean, this is like in many ways a brand new football team. And so they're going to have to replace a bunch of guys that were extremely productive for them and helping them get back-to-back 9-win seasons.
And at the quarterback position, that's where I think fans will notice the biggest difference from last year to this year. You had Josh Hoover, cannon of an arm, threw a beautiful ball, but gunslinger mentality, threw a lot of interceptions, especially towards the tail end of last season, versus this Jaden Craig who's got an NFL body, maybe doesn't have as strong of an arm or the accuracy that Hoover had, but he does not make mistakes. High football IQ, he's going to be checking it down instead of going for the vertical route, and it'll be more sustained drives, I think, for TCU offensively.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note they're going to play North Carolina now to open the season in Ireland. So, add that to the mix in terms of we haven't really seen teams go overseas and come back and be successful. Maybe it derailed Iowa State and K-State seasons last year. I don't know, but they, both were teams expected to compete for a Big 12 championship, but neither ended up getting to Arlington. So we'll have to watch both TCU, Arizona State, and Kansas in terms of their overseas trips, but they open up the season against North Carolina, and a team in North Carolina should be vastly improved from last year.
They only have 4 Big 12 road games. They get 5 Big 12 home games in Fort Worth. They play at UCF, at Baylor. They play at Arizona, and they wrap the season at Texas Tech. Their home games are BYU, West Virginia, Kansas, Kansas State, and Utah. So based off of last year's Big 12 standings, they play the top 3 teams in the Big 12. They have one of the more challenging schedules, I think, on paper going into the year.
Yeah. No, I mean, and this was, again, the case for TCU last year, too. I mean, probably a reason that neither you nor I picked them to win the Big 12. And, I mean, at the end of the day, that might have been the reason they didn't win the Big 12. They lost some crucial games, but they had a really tough schedule last year. And Sonny Dykes said to us before the season, yeah, I mean, it looks difficult on paper, but you never know in this conference because there's a lot of turnover and a lot of parity, but I don't know that we saw that last year. And again, this year, looking on paper, it's another difficult schedule for them.
Is another 9-win season good enough at TCU?
It's really interesting because it feels like the perception there is down. And yet, back-to-back 9-win seasons
for the first time in over a decade.
That's impressive. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, that 9 wins should be good enough. But, I mean, the problem is you're Sonny Dykes. You went to the national championship game your first year. So the standard is so high and the expectations are so high for what you're going to do that, like, anything short of winning the Big 12 championship. And remember, he didn't win the Big 12 championship that year.
Right.
You remember that. K-State did. So I think that's the difficulty is, it's 4 years? They've been to bowl games in 3 out of 4. They've won 9 games, at least in 3 out of those 4, but they haven't won a Big 12 championship. And, of course, if you haven't gotten back to the national championship, you got to win a Big 12 championship.
Right. Sonny Dykes, the head football coach at TCU, is coming up next. We will ask him about his coaching moves that they made this offseason, bringing in Gordon Samus, who is at UConn. last year. Sonny Dykes, TCU's Armadillo Spring Road Trip, touring Big 12 country team that we're highlighting today, 9-4 back-to-back seasons. What will it take for them to break through? Sonny Dykes after the break. He's Ari, I'm James. This is Big 12 Radio.